All right, let's talk about a book that for over 100 years has made a really bold promise. It claims there's one simple, powerful secret to a better life. It's so short you can read it in an hour, but its ideas are so big they've basically shaped the entire self-help world. We're diving into James Allen's As a Man Thinketh.
That right there, that one sentence is pretty much the entire book. The idea is simple, but it's also kind of radical. It says you are not a product of your circumstances. You are a product of your thoughts. Everything you see on the outside is just a mirror reflecting what's going on inside your head.
I mean, it's a tempting idea, right? The thought of having total control over your life just by getting a handle on your own mind. But is this some kind of timeless wisdom we've forgotten, or is it a dangerously simplistic philosophy that just doesn't work in the real world today?
So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the powerful core message. Then we'll get into the pretty fierce backlash against it. And finally, we'll try to figure out what a balanced, useful takeaway looks like for us here in the 21st century. So where did this wild idea even come from? Well, to really get the message, you first have to understand the man who wrote it, James Allen.
Now, you might think a philosophy about total self-reliance would come from someone born with a silver spoon. But for Allen, it was the exact opposite. His ideas were forged in real hardship. When he was just 15, his dad was murdered, and his family was left with nothing. He had no choice but to try and build his own life from the ground up. And that context, well, it's everything when you're trying to understand his point of view.
Okay, so keeping that backstory in mind, let's dig into the core philosophy itself. Because Allen wasn't just saying, hey, think positive. He was proposing what he believed was a fundamental law of the universe, something as real and predictable as gravity.
And this is the absolute key. Allen argues that nothing in your life is an accident. Your job, your health, your relationships, he believed all of it grows from the hidden seeds of your most common thoughts. For example, if you feel stuck in a dead-end job, he would say that situation is just a physical printout of an inner belief that you aren't worthy of something more. The central metaphor he uses all through the book is that your mind is a garden, and you are the master gardener. You can either actively plant seeds of purpose, courage, and joy, or you can just let the weeds of fear, doubt, and self-pity run wild. Either way, he says, you are responsible for whatever grows there. He basically saw it as a direct three-step chain reaction. For instance, it starts with a hidden thought, maybe a feeling of victimhood. That thought then crystallizes into a habit of complaining or blaming other people. And finally, that habit solidifies into the circumstance of a life where you feel totally powerless. For Allen, that link was direct and unbreakable. And this is really the ultimate promise of the book. It's not just about stopping bad things from happening. It's about making good things happen. If you hold a clear, powerful vision in your mind of what you want to be or achieve, you'll set forces in motion that will eventually make it real. It's an incredibly powerful idea. But is it really how the world works? Right, but that was written over a century ago. And in the time since, this idea has faced a major backlash. Modern critics argue this way of thinking isn't just old-fashioned. They say it's actively harmful and promotes a worldview that's just totally disconnected from reality. And this is really the heart of the debate. If someone gets sick with a serious illness, is that because of wrong thought, like Allen suggests, or is it just biology? If someone is born into poverty, does that reveal their character, or does it create enormous real-world obstacles? This is where the philosophy starts to feel really uncomfortable for a lot of people today. And the criticisms are serious. At its worst, this philosophy can lead to a total lack of empathy. It basically suggests that people who are dealing with systemic injustice or clinical depression or trauma are just not thinking the right way. It also encourages what some people call toxic positivity, where you're supposed to just push down valid emotions like grief or anger because they're labeled as wrong thoughts. This comment from a reader on Reddit just hits the nail on the head. If you truly believe that everyone is 100% responsible for everything that happens to them, it becomes really easy to judge people who are struggling and to completely ignore all the complex forces that actually shape our lives. So, what's the verdict?
Is the book just, as one person put it, out-of-touch garbage, or is there a baby in the bathwater here? Can we find some timeless wisdom in this old book without falling for its really damaging blind spots?
Well, when you look at it with a bit of balance, you can kind of see both sides. The book's real strength is that it's a powerful call for self-awareness and personal responsibility. It gives you a sense of agency. But its huge weakness is that it's completely blind to outside factors and lacks compassion for struggles that are genuinely not our fault.
But here's where things get really fascinating. Modern science has actually confirmed the core mechanism Alan was talking about, even if he took the idea to an extreme. We now know about brain plasticity, the fact that your thoughts can literally rewire your brain. Psychologists talk about our mental frameworks that filter how we see the world. And of course, there's Carol Dweck's famous work on growth mindset, which proved that just believing you can improve a thought actually leads to better results, a circumstance.
So if we were to create a more modern, balanced model of what shapes our lives, it might look something like this. The big takeaway is that, yes, our mindset is a powerful piece of the puzzle, but it's just one piece. Our lives are this complex mix of our inner world, our biology, our environment, and just plain old luck. It seems like Alan was only looking at one corner of the picture.
So, where does that leave us? How do we take this powerful idea about thought and actually use it in a responsible way today without falling into its traps? Let's try to build a modern framework.
We can build something much better. It starts with Alan's core wisdom. Pay attention to your thoughts. But it doesn't stop there. We add a dose of reality by considering our context. Then we shift the focus from trying to control every thought to simply choosing our actions. And most importantly, we add the one ingredient Alan left out: self-compassion. We have to recognize that sometimes life is just hard, and that's okay. It's not a sign of a weak mind, it's a sign of being human.
At the end of the day, Alan's book leaves us with this huge question. Is your mind the all-powerful architect of your reality? Or is it more like the captain of a ship? You know, someone who can't control the winds or the waves, but is still responsible for steering the rudder and setting the sails as best they can through the storm. Maybe the real truth is somewhere in between.
Thanks for digging into this with us. If this explainer gave you some new things to think about, please do us a favor and like, subscribe, and share it with your friends and family. We'll see you next time.